Okay, so um, welcome to today's class. We are discussing public policy and employment relations. Public policy and employment relations. Just like the topic implies, we need to examine the word public policy and employment relations. Of course, the word public has to do with general people in a particular society, locality, or in a given place, general people. Then policy has to do with a system, guidelines, laws, and regulations that are put in place to guide, excuse me, to guide behavior, to guide actions, and to guide decisions of both people and government. So looking at it together, we can say public policy is an institutionalized proposal or a decided set of elements, which could be laws, which could be regulations, which could be guidelines, and general actions to resolve, or address relevant and real world problems that is guided by a conception and often implemented by several kind of programs. Now, these policies govern and include various aspects of life. So talking about public policy, it involves different aspects of life. It may not necessarily be in one aspect of society. For instance, we could go into education. There are laws, guidelines that guide an educational system. It could be healthcare. Yes, how health is managed within a locality, within a country, within an institution. It could be finance, it could be economics, it could even be transportation. You name it, any area possible. Okay. It's finance, health, economics, systems, transportation, and what have you, security. Okay, all of these things are various areas or sectors that could be considered for effective, public policy or policy. So this area is what is called public administration. So in essence, whenever there are no laws, of course, you know that a place and people may be left to, as it were, do whatsoever they want, and there are no guiding principles. So, but what public policy does is that it creates that system to which everyone can be guided. So public policy can be considered to be the sum total of government's direct and indirect activities and has been conceptualized in various ways. So they are created or enacted on behalf of the public, especially by the government. And sometimes they could be made by non-profit organization in collaboration, sometimes with communities or stakeholders in different aspects to guide how things are done. Okay, so they are typically made by policymakers affiliated with democratic policies, okay, and they are currently guided by their. So a popular way of understanding and engaging in public policy is through a series of stages. Yes, it has to go through a series of stages that is called a policy cycle. So policies, and you don't just wake up, as it were, and in one day you decide to make policies. No, policies has to go through processes or stages, which is what we call policy cycle, because various organs, various aspects has to be understudied to be able to effectively understand policies. You have to look at it from the government, you have to look at it from the eye of the public, you have to look at it from the social impact, the economic impact, you have to consider demographics, sex, people, you have to consider international factors, all of these things depending on the kind of policy you are formulating. If you're formulating a policy on security, for instance, you may have to consider, okay, what if there are strangers that come around that place? Okay, should people be allowed to bear arms? What if people are psychologically not stable? What if people start unlawfully getting access to arms? and all of these things. So you have to look, it's a multi-dimensional and multifaceted aspect to look at when considering uh, the cycle of policy. Okay, so it's very important to understand that aspect in dealing with policies. So officials considered as policymakers bear responsibility to advance the interest of a host of what different stakeholders. That's what I just mentioned. Because in policy making, you want to consider different stakeholders, and everyone wants themselves or themselves to be properly represented. So policy design entails conscious and deliberate effort to define policy aims and map them instrumentally. Academic and other experts in policy studies have developed a range of tools and approaches in helping to do what? Carry out public policies. Government action is a decision, policies, and actions taken by government which can have significant impact on individuals, can have significant impact on organization, and can have significant impact on society at large. Regulations, subsidies, taxes, spendings. I give an example. Here in Nigeria, recently when the current government came into power, they removed subsidy. Now, the removal of subsidy immediately plunged the economy into what I want to call hardship, intense hardship, right? Because the economy largely is driven by the oil and gas sector. And so whatever affects the prices within that sector definitely will affect the economy, especially petroleum. So petrol, I beg your pardon. And so petrol shot up and every other thing, transportation shoots up, cost of things in the market shoot up, movement of goods and services shot up, rent shot up, just goods and services that are even obtained at a very minimal price, all of these things shot up. So what are we saying? Once a policy is not guided and is not properly taken, it can have a significant impact even on the livelihood of people, to the extent that people were even committing suicide because they could not bear the weight of the problem. There was a time when government brought in um, a cashless system where they said everybody will not use cash, and it was a terrible decision that caused a lot of challenge in society. There was no cash, people could not buy, people could not sell, and it was just a huge problem, you know. So all of these things are systems, are policies. When poor policies are made within the economy, and this is what it results to. So regulations, subsidies, taxes, and spending are just a few of the various shapes it may take. Achieving certain social economic objectives such as fostering economic expansion, lowering inequality, and safeguarding the environment should be the aim of government action. Government should not exist to suppress the people or make life difficult for the people. Government exists to help life and society be better. Yes. So let us proceed to look at we have been looking at various concepts of public policy, but let's just still look at one or two so that we don't dwell on the introduction for too long. So public policy can be conceptualized in various ways according to the purposes of the speaker or author. One dividing line in conceptions of public policy is between those that see it primarily in terms of ideas. Those that see it primarily in terms of ideas, And by ideas we mean by principles and plans of action on those that see it as a collection of empirical phenomena. That's the things that are done and the outcomes. Okay. So these are the various ways that sometimes public policy is viewed, first of all, as ideas. And by ideas, how people think, how people see it, which could be based on principles and actions, and those that see it as a collection of empirical phenomena that is based on how they are done, outcome, implementation. So this conceptualization is suitable when the matter of concern is relatively simple and unambiguous, and the means of enactment are expected to be highly disciplined. But where the matter is complex and contexted, so we are talking about the fact that policies could be very simple. There could be basic decisions that can be taken on a policy, which is very straightforward. But there are also policies, there are also policies which are very complex. There are also policies which are very complex that the decision is not linear, it's not straight. It requires a lot of plans, policies, systems. It needs to go through a series of processes, before you can come up with a standard. Okay, so if you're dealing with simple policies, it just tells you what to do. Okay, this is it. Let's come up with a basic policy that everybody is cool with. But if you're talking about some issues that are very complex, they are unambiguous, you do not have a linear way of seeing them, then in such cases you may need to do more analysis before you can come up with a policy that may be accepted. So if the formal policy of an educational system forbid, okay, let me leave that one so that we don't spend so much time. So one of the most common, known and controversial concepts of public policy, that of Thomas Dye, who says public policy is what government choose or choose not to do. Okay, and widely Dye's concept is also criticized as being an empty concept. Dye himself admitted that this concept discourages elaborate academic discussions of definite public policy. So what Dye was saying is, he said, as far as he is concerned, whatever government wants to do is what they do. And whatever government wants to do, when they do it, that becomes a policy. But it was also criticized that no, 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 that is not true. You cannot say government policy is just what it chooses to do without giving room to the fact that there may be there's a broader spectrum where government gives room to stakeholders to be able to also bring in their views. So in an institutionalized view, the foundation of public policy is composed of national constitutional laws and regulations. Further, foundational aspects include both judicial interpretations and regulations, which are generally authorized by legislation. Public policy is considered strong when it solves problems efficiently and effectively, serves and supports governmental institutions and policies, and encourages active citizenship. So, this is a summary of the fact that in looking at public policy, okay, that policy is very good when it solves the problem efficiently and effectively, because every policy is meant to handle a problem. Secondly, we say a policy is very good and is strong when it serves and supports governmental institutions. In other words, these are systems that have been put in place, and if it's guiding the government actions, then we can say it's a good policy. And lastly, when it encourages active citizenship, the citizenry are happy and is able to, address the issues and they are encouraged by that policy, we say that it is what a good, it's a good policies. So let's quickly proceed to look at much of the public policy concerned with evaluation of decision making and government bureaucracy. So public policy making and implementation. Public policy making and implementation. So public policy making can be characterized as a dynamic, complex, and interactive system through which public problems are identified and resolved through the creation of new policy or reform of existing policy. Public problems can originate in endless ways and require different policy responses, such as regulations, subsidies, and all of that. Okay, the public problems that influence public policy making can be economic, social, or even political in nature. A government holds legal monopoly to initiate, threaten physical force to achieve its end when necessary. So let's quickly proceed. Now, public policy making is a time-consuming process that involves what we call a policy cycle. Now, the policy cycle is the set of process that, must be proceeded through to be able to come up with a guideline or a policy that will be implemented across board. So let's look at the certain aspects that are considered in having a public cycle or before a public can be decided. First of all, there has to be an agenda setting, and this agenda settings identifies the problems that require government action, deciding which one deserves more attention and define the nature of the problem. So imagine having, you know, 20 problems on government table to be addressed, 20 challenges to be addressed. You don't just say, okay, since we have written down 20, let's start with any. There has to be a prioritization. Which one requires more attention? Which one is a challenge? And based on that, you can start solving the problem. So social construct. Most public problems are made through the reflection of social and ideological values. Most public problems are made through the reflection of social and ideological values. As societies and communities evolve over time, the nature in which norms, customs, and morals are proven accepted and unacceptable and, changes over time. Thus, the search for crucial problems to solve become difficult to distinguish. Okay, so we're talking about the social dimension, considering the various aspects and the impact that policy is going to make. So it has to go through a series of ideologies, discussion, reflection, because changes occur. A policy may have been made 50 years ago, and the policy at that time served, but the world has become dynamic. A lot of things have changed, a lot of things have evolved, and such policies may need to be reviewed again. So social construct of the problems. Then policy stream, which is a concept developed by John Kingon as a model proposed to show compelling problems to be conjoined together, appropriate political climate, and favorable and feasible solutions that flow together to move on a public policy agenda. Okay, so this policy stream is looking at problems that can be looked at, together. Yes. Okay, certain challenges flow in the same direction. And so these challenges could be reviewed together within the shortest possible time to be able to come up with policies as quick as possible. So then the next thing after policy stream is problem stream, because the definition of public problems are not obvious. They are mostly often denied and not acted upon. The problem stream represent the policy process to compromise for how what the problems are to create policy solution, because not all problems requires a public policy. Yes, there are problems that will naturally go. There are problems that are communal in nature. That's societal challenges, problems, but there are also, so not necessarily all problems may require full government attention or intervention. So you have to look at, that's where problem stream comes in. They have to look at that problem if it's something that is worthy of government intervention. So this is represented eh, by these factors. Number one, indicators. Policy stream is can be viewed from what we call the scientific view, measurement, qualitative, statistical data and analysis, empirical evidences. You're trying to check to see if this challenge is as it is. Okay, then the next is interpretation. Public policy, policy makers make judgments whether an issue constitutes a problem worthy of action. Is it worthy of action? Is it worthy that something be done about it? Okay, then ideology, elements of dominant values, customs, beliefs. Okay, all of these things are what we call a problem stream, examining it, trying to understand if it represents a problem worthy of what, coming up with a policy. So you look at various factors, the indicators, you look at the interpretation. By interpretation, we mean public policy makers make judgments whether or not an issue constitutes problem worthy of action. Ideology, you look at the values, the custom that drives the problem. Okay, and if it needs attention, then you look at instances, media coverage support over the issue. You examine all of these factors to help determine the worthiness of the problem. So you see why generally making public policy is not just an executive decision where somebody just comes and says, because of my power, I have decided this. No, it goes through a series of processes for for it to become what it is. And let's look at the issue attention cycle. Now, issue attention cycle is a concept developed by Anthony Downs in 1972, where problems progress through various stages. Problems proceed through 5 stages. This reinforces how policy agenda does not necessarily lead to policy change. As public interest dissipates, most problems end up resolving themselves or get ignored by policy makers. So the first stage in looking at problems is what is called pre-problem stage. In the attention cycle, that a problem passes through various stages, and the first one is the pre-problem stage, which is that the problem is not recognized by the public, media, or policymakers. There are challenges we have today that people have been calling for in the society. People have been calling for in the society, and this problem is not recognized. It's not seen as a problem. Not because it's not a problem, but it's still at that pre-problem stage where it has not caught the attention of people. The second is alarm discovery or euphoric enthusiasm. Something is identified as a problem, supported awareness by media to pursue seriousness of the problem. So something is identified as a problem, supported awareness by media to pursue seriousness of the problem. So alarm discovery, everybody's this thing is a huge problem and something needs to be done about it. Yes, it has become an alarm discovery. Then realization of cost will be incurred by the solutions. realization of costs which will be incurred by the solution, because uh, solving problems can be expensive. So investigating through cost benefit analysis, bringing awareness of financial, environmental, structural COP to consider solutions and what it makes. So what solutions can we get and how can those solutions be implemented within this system? Number three, so realize, okay, that's number three. Number four, decline in public interest. After a long time, the public will not stay on an issue for forever. After some time, okay, everybody will start, this problem, oh, let's see what government does about it, or, and before you know, um, the issue begins to die down. So citizens acquire acceptance of a problem and it becomes normalized. Newer issues attract attention of the public, limited attention span encourages public policymakers to delay developing policy to see which policies, which 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 to see which public troubles demanding necessary and worthwhile resolving. So let me review them before, first of all, the pre-problem stage, when the problem has not been known and when it has not been seen and it has not been known by all and sundry. It has not been recognized yet. Then the second is alarm discovery, when it now becoming a realization that this is a challenge, this is a problem, and it needs to be confronted. Number three, that realization of cost. That's the third. The realization of the cost of what it would take to solve that problem. And in many instances, you will see that they may be considering that if it's too expensive to solve that problem, then it may not be given consideration to if it's too expensive to solve that problem. Then the next is public decline. Public decline. After some time, especially when it has not been attended to, the public may stop not giving it to attention again. Then issue slips off and back. The issue effectively disappears, although it has the possibility to re-emerge in other pressing circumstances. In some other instances, the disappearance is just that it has been swept under carpet or it is not known. Okay, so issue slips off and backs down. This is what we call the issue attention cycle. Okay, how a problem comes and the way people are talking about it, trying to get a solution, you would think literally that problem is going to be solved within a few weeks, and before you know what, it fizzles out and it dies. Okay, call that the problem attention cycle. Now let's look at policy formulation. The course is public policy. So let's look at policy formulation. This is the setting of the objectives for the policy, along with identifying the cost and effect of solutions that could be proposed from policy instruments. So let's look at various elements under policy formulation. The first is legitimation. Legitimation is when approval or support for policy instrumentation is gathered, involving one or more combination of approval, which could be legislative and executive, seeking consent through different referendums. Okay, yes, it's when you get more like, you want to say more like an approval to solve a problem. Yes, you've gotten that consent from the various stakeholders that this problem has to be solved and should be solved. Then the next thing is implementation. Policy implementation is establishing or employing an organization to take responsibility for the policy, making sure the organization has the resources which can be legal to do so, in addition to making sure that the policy is carried out as planned. An example of this would be the Department of Education. Can just leave that, just an example here. Then the next thing is is enforcement. Enforcement mechanisms are a central part of various policies. Enforcement mechanisms could determine natural resources, government outcomes, and pollution-related policies may require proper enforcement mechanisms. Okay, enforcement may include laws, combine incentive, and instrumentation to help enforce policy. Enforcement has to do with making sure that that policy is done, is implemented, that is carried out. So a meta-analysis of policy studies across multiple public domains suggest enforcement mechanisms are only modifiably treaty design choice with the potential to improve the mostly low effectiveness of international treaties. So we are saying that there has to be systems and structures to be able to make sure that policies are enforced. That is, it is done. We make sure that those policies are done. Then there's what we call an implementation gap. As stated by Paul Carey, the implementation gap are the stages a policies must go through before an authoritative decision is made. Okay. Yes, and as an example, the agenda's setting stage is followed by policy implementation. This will continue until policy is implemented. So that space, that lag in time between when policy is implemented and when the policy is approved and when it's like enforced, that gap is what we call implementation. And implementation could be top to down or down up, what you call top down or bottom up. So should the policy be implemented from government down, or should it be implemented from the lowest point up? That is, from the lowest point, you mean from the target group that are affected. Then we'll look at evaluation. Evaluation is a process of assessing the extent to which policy has been successful, or to extent to which that policy has served the reason why it was enacted from the beginning. We call that an evaluation of the policy. Then we also look at policy maintenance, which is when policymakers decide to either terminate or continue the policy. A policy could be terminated if it's not serving the purpose for which it was established or it was made. Okay, called a policy maintenance. Okay, then the last is okay, I was talking about policy maintenance as when policymakers decide to terminate or continue a policy. Yes, yeah, because a policy after some time may be viewed as unnecessary and discontinued, or it may be good and maintained. Now, this composition, this cycle will, unless discontinued or go back to the agenda setting phase, and the cycle will commence again. However, policy cycle is illustrated in a chronological and cyclical nature, which could be misleading as in actuality. Policy making would include overlapping stages between multiple interactions. So with this policy cycle, we are talking about the fact that it is not as straightforward as it seems. policies definitely we have to go through. There will be overlapping systems, and we have to go through many stages and back and forth before it can really become policies that can be implemented. So dealing with real life scenarios is not as easy as it sounds because of different interests, as we said at the beginning of the class. So likewise, although its heuristic model is straightforward and easy to understand, the cycle is not totally applicable in all situations of policy making due to its far being too simple, as there are more crucial steps that should go through in more real life and complex scenarios. So criticisms of policy studies approach. The mainstream tradition of policies studies has been criticized for over simplifying the process of policy making, particularly in the use of models, okay, based on rational choice theory, failing to capture the current dynamics in today's society, as well as sustaining ambiguities and misunderstanding. In contrast, an anthropological approach to studying public policy deconstructs may of reconstruct many of the categories and concepts that are currently used, seeking to gain deeper understanding of the configurations of actors, activities, and influences that goes into shaping policy decisions. So the criticisms of the policy studies that says, it is too simplistic the way it is stated, because in real life stage, it is not a 1+1 = 2. Policy implementation of policy making is a huge dynamic. But as we know, we are summarizing the course based on the time allotted to us, so you can do your further reading. So responsibility of policymakers. Each system is influenced by different public problems and issues, and has different stakeholders. As such, each requires different public policy. In public policy making, numerous individual, corporation, and non-profit organization and interest group compete and collaborate to influence policymakers to act in a particular way. Therefore, the failure of public policies is possibly not only the politician's fault, because he or she is never the lone player in the field of decision making. There is a multitude of actors pursuing their goals, sometimes complementary, often competing or contradictory. In any case, public policies can be the result of actors involved, such as interest organization, and not necessarily the will of the public. Furthermore, public policy is also affected by social and economic conditions, prevailing political values, and public moods. The public mood and the structure of government, which plays role in the complexity of public policy making. So we're going to stop our class here for today. When we meet next, we're going to look at what we call public analysis. We just look at the responsibility for public policy maker, and we said, public policy makers face such a huge challenge in coming up with structured and well-defined and good public policy systems, because it is often faced with a plethora of issues, plethora of personal gains and what people stand to benefit. Is faced with a plethora of issues because of the various stakeholders that are involved in the system and in the process, such that if it doesn't favor possibly a political party, it doesn't favor one dimension of maybe another aspect of the country, if it doesn't favor the international people, some organizations, everybody wants it to favor. What about the social impact, the economic impact? What about the prevailing political value system of the, possibly the government in power, the public mood? What do they want? How is it affecting them? And the structure of the government that is in place, how did they come into power? Dubious or right means? All of these things affect their body language and also affect the way policies are implemented generally. So when we meet in our next class, we are going to continue from, we're going to start from policy analysis. Have a wonderful day.